then, you know, meeting up with Gary and Veryan, which was they were all sort of based out, you know, it was Hertfordshire, another Hertfordshire, you know, because I mean that's, you know, Welwyn Garden City, and we started. We decided we were going to try and form a band, and I think then it got into, you know, quite serious sort of rehearsing, you know, and but it was quite sort of tricky, that, because it music that's written and it isn't written for the saxophone can be really hard work when it's coming from the piano, because it's not considering the instrument necessarily, and that, you know, that caused a lot of well, at the age we were all at, you know. But we did work hard, because we thought we had got something going, and it was a bit of an adventure, you know. Didn't really know.
We're talking about the Stinky Winkles.
Yeah.
And that's a band that was rewarded with quite a lot of acclaim to begin with, but
yeah,
ultimately it was quite disappointing in terms of output.
Yeah, we didn't.
You did this album in Poland.
Yeah.
So how do you look back on?
The only stuff that we did really there were a few BBC recordings. I think we did Jazz Club with Peter Clayton one night, and I think Mike Osborne was on that as well, on the other, because they used to put sessions. Yeah, it was like two sets. That was actually quite an interesting experience, because I used to listen to that programme on a Sunday night. I think it was it a Sunday night it went out?
It was Jazz on Sunday.
Yeah, it was Peter Clayton's Jazz Club, and it was kind of, and I always used to listen to it just to see who was on, because it was a lot of, you know, British bands, and there was quite a variety in that, and I was always fascinated to hear, you know, it was one of those things that I always used to tune into if I could, and so to do it was kind of a weird experience, because you had this sort of small audience in the studio, so it was like a gig, but it wasn't really like a gig, because it was studio kind of dryness.
Formal kind of.
Yeah, so it was kind of I don't know what Peter Clayton made of it, really. I think he was kind of, how that came about, I can't quite remember. But then the Jazz in Britain stuff, well, yeah, it was jazz. We were Charles Fox. Charles Fox was always very good. Mm-hmm. So we did a few of those. That tour of Poland was that was quite something, as I remember.
It was right at the time of Solidarność.
Yeah, they were striking everywhere, and everything got shut down. I remember we were sort of staying in places that were. It got quite rough, and people were. I remember people were queuing up for bread at 2 in the morning. This was around October, November time, you know, freeze. They were really kind of shutting down on people there, and we were obviously behind it, you know, and we had, people would travel, you know, to come and hear the gigs. I remember it was a gig in Krakow, I think, and it was an amazing night, you know, full, you know, and they'd really, you know, the effort that people had made to come and hear it with. And yes, that was quite an experience, because it escalated as time went on when we were there, and by the time we then got to fly back out, it was really quite. They were just about to you know, shut down everything. So we just got out, and Gary, I remember Gary, he didn't get his equipment back. Well, eventually he did, but they impounded it because they wanted him to pay in dollars. I remember this, the government, so the officials, to put it on the plane, they wanted it in dollars. We didn't have dollars, we had nothing. We'd been paid in Polish money that was
worthless.
It was absolutely worthless. So he left without his amp, which was a nice Fender Twin Reverb, you know, and he got it back eventually. But it was really quite, it got quite sort of, there was a lot of tension there. A lot of armed guards at the check-in desk and stuff. They didn't like us, actually.
Yeah. Was it on that same trip that you recorded the album?
Well, it must be. I think it was, yeah, because it was live. Yeah, it was part of the Warsaw Jazz Festival, as I recall. Yeah. So yes, I think it was all. Yeah, it was from the gig. Mm-hmm. But you're right. I mean, we didn't sort of put much out in terms of releasing albums.
And was that due to the environment in terms of the recording labels and stuff not being?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was. I think, yeah. I mean, maybe someone would have taken us on. I'm not sure. There was also a kind of. There was a bit of kind of conflict within the group, you know, in terms of direction, and or you know, particularly Veryan and Gary. Gary, I think, Gary was sort of leaning more towards a slightly more. I don't mean conventional because it's not, but there was something slightly more accessible about it. Where I mean, Veryan was sort of. Then we're moving into all this very systematic stuff that was very much piano generated because I think he was studying for himself as well, you know. So it was like the group was almost like a vehicle just to sort of extend a lot of stuff that he was working out for himself as a kind of thesis, really. You know, particularly with sort of counter rhythms and, you know, independence. And odd times that were sort of interlocking, which strangely enough was all part of that design that evolved with Trevor's band. Mm-hmm.
Trevor Watts.
Yeah, and Veryan was very kind of integral to a lot of that work that Trevor was working with Veryan. I mean, as far as I know, he still does. You know, Veryan's had a long working relationship with Trevor, but that music was very much like that in the same vein. You know, a lot of overlaying, interlocking patterns, asymmetric times that kind of linked up after a certain amount of time. You know, so they kind of a bit like a sort of puzzle, really.